All right, we have one more minute.
Thanks for being here. Wisconsin, Michigan. I see some Australian teachers, Australian
All
teachers,
right.
California, Malaysia,
Wow,
Nashville.
that's fun. It's late.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it's
Or it's
tomorrow for
early.
them. It's early. It's early tomorrow. They're joining us from the future.
Colorado. That's where I am.
Mhm.
Michigan.
Yeah. If you see your name is not yours, feel free to switch it on your a lot of you are signed in as Lindsay Journo. It's like, whose line is it anyway, or whatever, who is the real one? Uh,
All right. I see that it's 7 o'clock, so I am going to get started, everyone. Good day or evening to wherever you may be. We're so glad that you've chosen to join us today. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Please remain muted throughout the event. Submit any questions in the chat for the Q&A at the end, and please don't private message the speaker or the hosts. We're scheduled for 75 minutes, but we are really happy to stay longer if needed. I'm Donna Heitmanik, and it's my honor to moderate today's event, Shifting the Paradigm, Merging the Science of Learning with the Science of Reading, brought to you by the Structured Linguistic Literacy Collaborative. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Marnie Ginsberg, and our group discussion leaders are Nora Chabazi, Svetlana Svetkovic, and Jennifer Newman. As educators and program developers, we've seen strong, lasting literacy gains through approaches that aren't yet reflected in mainstream curriculum or policy. As the science of reading shapes important shifts, we're curious, what other research-informed methods might be worth exploring? This question resonates with me personally because after 49 years in education, I'm still eager to learn and grow. Embracing new approaches isn't easy. I believed I was already using the best methods for my students, but I'm grateful for staying open to the what ifs because it's not what I believe to be true, but it's what the outcomes show. Tonight, we hope to inspire open conversation, and we welcome your curiosity and openness. We hope to spark open conversation before any single approach becomes the default. And now, Dr. Marnie Ginsberg.
Thank you, Donna. Let's see if we can get the tech to work for us. Share sound and desktop. Thank you all for being here. Okay. And let's see. Is that working?
yep.
Awesome. Okay. We are so glad you're here, as Donna said, to explore a different approach to foundational reading instruction. And our team here, our hosts, have worked in classrooms, have been tutors, we've worked in clinics, and we have seen how small design shifts in instruction can still produce rapid measurable growth. So today we want to focus on a version of synthetic phonics, also known as speech to print or structured linguistic literacy, which we're going to call linguistic phonics. In this talk, we'll show what sets linguistic phonics apart, share supporting evaluation and experimental research and classroom data, and offer video examples of these features in action, and hopefully widen the lens on what's possible in teaching foundational reading skills. And we got to begin with the hard news. As you well know, I'm sure, according to the most recent US NAEP results, nearly 70% of fourth graders are not proficient in reading. And it's not just a number, it's really a national crisis here. And it's happening despite so many efforts on the part of teachers, schools, systems, and state legislation. And the reality is, even many older students continue to struggle as well. And so perhaps you're here because it's personal. What if 70% of your students facing you in the classroom never become proficient in reading? I imagine, however, you're here because you're not giving up. You may know that the research tells us a different story. As Dr. Jan Hasbrook says, quote, compelling evidence from a convergence of research on reading is clearly indicating that approximately 95% of all students can achieve literacy skills at or approaching grade level. Yet we're not there yet, right? There's this big gap between the research, what the potential is, and what we're experiencing in our classrooms here in the US and in many places in the English speaking world. So we are just envisioning, what if there's another way? What could be different? Might we tweak what we're doing? It's particularly methodologically to get closer to that 95% aim. And I know it's something that we all are aiming for. So there's a lot of explanations for that gap for sure, but one reason might be the methods. And as you may know, before the science of reading movement really even had any traction, as far back as 2015, Dr. David Kilpatrick pointed out the need for more innovative approaches. He wrote, quote, "The three classic approaches, whole word, phonics, and whole language, all originated long before there was any scientific research on reading development and reading difficulties. Our current approaches to teaching reading represent a repackaging of assumptions and methodologies from these three classic approaches. Yet we have extensive data that could be used as the basis of our educational practices." And then in this Essentials book, he goes on to delineate all the ways in which systematic explicit phonics do help kids learn to read. But there's like still this question of, what are we doing the optimal way? And in his analysis of reading intervention research, he grouped a variety of programs. This minimal to modest results category approaches, these include really most of the approaches that we're using today. Of standard score point gains of just 0 to 6. This was his minimal to modest results category. And then he had this other category of reading interventions out of the research base of highly successful results with standard scores, I think of around 12 to 25 standard score point gains, a significant difference. And interestingly, these programs, I got a little extra annotation going. Sorry about that. I'll see if that's those stray lines. So excuse me, but he did not identify these programs as linguistic phonics, but from our experience, we see that these programs have the same roots. Linda Mood's LIPS program, phonographics, Discover Reading by Dr. Stephen Trush, really was a combination of LIPS and phonographics, and then Read, Write, and Type. So these were the approaches that were in that highly successful category, and they all share most of the features of what we're going to talk about today. And one thing that really sparked the field, I think, at least some of us, was way back in 1995, and there was an article in the Annals of Dyslexia. And this was a study of phonographics. It was just an evaluation, but it was 87 students aged 6 to 16 who had been struggling, and they received just 12 hours of one-on-one instruction in reading. And guess what happened? Really large gains. On the Woodcock Reading Mastery, we see 13, almost 14 standard score point gains. For word identification and for the word attack, 19 standard score point gains. These are really unusual and probably seemed unbelievable to many people, honestly, because it's so out of the norm. And again, it was just one study and evaluation, but to many of us, we were like, what? This was a spark that prompted curiosity about what might be possible. And so around that time, both Nora and I began independently aiming to try to hit this 12 mark timelines, getting kids successful at reading in 12 hours. And we've continued refining that ever since. And we've been successful at doing that with hundreds of, maybe for Nora, even thousands of kids. We weren't the only ones, though. There were other people and organizations that were inspired by that article and some of the writings that came out of the 1990s related to that. And so there was this blossoming of related approaches. So this is a family tree of sorts, showing a variety of linguistic phonics approaches that share some common features. And my co-host and I today are most familiar with the linguistic phonics thread that developed out of Why Our Children Can't Read by Dr. Diane McGinnis. And that directly influenced the development of phonographics and the related programs that followed, including those that Nora and I developed. So these programs are for sure many and varied, and they have different features, but they do share some commonalities. And these are some things that we think we see in all of these programs, or most of them. They're applicable to kids of all ages. They rely on a framework and a small set of strategies rather than a rigid script. They can be used whole group, small group, one-on-one. They're integrated or threaded throughout the day, even into the content areas, even like their lifetime habits that we still use. And they work with all types of learners, students with dyslexia, other learning challenges, those who are typically developing, and even advanced learners. So it's hard for us to actually narrow down what it is exactly that we see that's common, but these are the 5 that we think are pretty ever present in the programs that we have experienced as tutors and teachers. So first, in linguistic phonics, we start with speech, not print. That is, instead of beginning with abstract letters, we connect spoken words that students bring to the school door the very first day, and they connect those spoken words to the printed word from day 1. Second, we integrate phonics, reading, writing, and phonemic awareness in the context of real words, again, from the beginning, not at week 13 or halfway through kindergarten. Third, we introduce advanced code like long vowels earlier than most mainstream phonics programs. So as a result, we're also able to introduce authentic text earlier. We're not really bound by a high standard of mastery. Instead, we're going to spiral and interleave so students revisit and strengthen the patterns of phonics information that they're gathering and words over time. The fourth distinctive is that we minimize the emphasis on teaching and memorizing declarative knowledge, such as phonics rules, 6-syllable types. Instead, we're going to focus on developing students' attention to the patterns of the written language. And we're going to help them develop procedural learning, just a handful of processes like sound-based decoding and encoding or spelling instead of memorizing rules. So as a result, this is like paving the way for students to lean on their natural tendency to learn through statistical gathering of information, and also the set for variability decoding strategy, which we'll get to later. And finally, in linguistic phonics approaches, instruction is highly responsive to each child's needs and diagnostic. We're actually looking for the errors, and that's how the student grows. So let's dig into this. Here's how it plays out. Let's just take those first 2 and we'll show some videos. Instead of starting with letters in isolation, we start with the sounds of language. Using the language that they're coming to us with, we map those letters to their knowledge. Again, instead of isolating skills like 15 minutes for letter sounds only, 15 minutes for oral only phonological awareness, we're just going to integrate those skills in the context of words to save time, but also more importantly, probably to make reading and spelling make more sense to the kids. So this is in contrast to a lot of the programs, in fact, even those that are getting mandated in various states and here in the US. A lot of programs are expecting like the beginning of kindergarten or maybe the beginning of an intervention. We're going to focus on letter names and or sounds, mostly in isolation like apple. And then there's this other 15 minutes of instruction that could go on for weeks, maybe a whole year of oral only phonological awareness, and maybe not even getting to the phoneme, the individual sounds and words. As a result, this is really delaying the alphabetic principle because it's harder for kids to make these connections between sounds and words when they're isolated. So there's a great number of things that have explained the theories and research that go into explaining how the kids learn to read. But I think this quote by Dr. Linnea Airy captures a lot of what we have learned as a field. She says, quote, "The process of learning sight words involves forming connections between graphemes and phonemes to bond spellings of their words to their pronunciations and meanings in memory. The process is enabled by phonemic awareness and by knowledge of the alphabetic system, which functions as a powerful mnemonic to secure spellings in memory." So a lot of this have been learning about this as the science of reading movement has educated many of us. And so I know that we probably embrace this, but what we think we're observing with a linguistic phonics approach is this: we're doing this process and we're revealing the alphabetic system really early so this bonding can happen. We've actually known that we need to put the pieces together for decades. Like this was a seminal study from 89 of 3 to 5-year-olds. And Byrne and Fielding Barnsley said, quote, in this experiment that they found with those pre-K kids, neither phonemic awareness nor letter sound knowledge was sufficient for acquisition of the alphabetic principle. They were needed in combination. And I think, again, a lot of us agree with that, but it's just the programs take a while to get to that point. But what's striking is what they said here near the end. It's encouraging that it only took 3 or 4 10 to 15-minute instructional sessions to be able to get this alphabetic principle idea. And we're talking, remember, even 3 and 4-year-olds. So we just want to see if we can get this accomplished a lot earlier. Okay, so we're going to show you an example video of this 3-year-old. This is his very first lesson, and you're going to see about a little snippet sped up so we can save time around the 7-minute mark. Notice we're starting with his speech. We are going to put multiple sub-processes together, and we're going to draw on his errors and coach him responsively. So this is just a little snippet to kind of represent, hopefully, those first 2 distinctives especially.
Making some really good words. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll make 1 or 2 more words, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so this word is going to be map. I need to use the map to find out where to go. Can you say the word map?
Map.
Map. Let's stretch out the word map. Map. You try it. Map. Nice. Do it again. Map. Nice. Okay. What was the first sound that you heard when I said, oh, you're shaking the table. Yeah. Can you scoot up a little bit? Thank you. Can you scoot up so I can see your face? The camera can see your face? Okay. What's the first thing that comes out of my mouth when I say, and you say, map?
Map.
Yes, that's the whole word. But just what's at the beginning, right here, when I say, map? Which one of these is You got it. Now say, Very nice. Now listen to the next sound. What do we hear next? Map. It's at the beginning. Ah. That is great. Which one is ah? That's pa. That's ah. Say ah. So look, you've already got That's the beginning of the word map. Remember, we're building the word map, right?
Pa.
Well, not pa, but map. Can you say map again?
Map.
Okay, look what you got. You've got map. We need the last sound. That's ah. You got it right here. You got it. Look at it. This is ah. You got it. What's the last sound? That is right. Pa. Is this pa? It is.
Pa.
Nicely done. Okay, check the sounds. Well, remember, we're building the word map. Ah. That's great. You made the word map. Awesome. You've made the word mom and map and mop and one other word. Let's see.
Now he's proud of himself because he's starting to grasp this alphabetic principle. And did you see how we were drawing on his speech system? We're putting multiple sub-processes together, the phonemic awareness, the phonics, and he's uncovering the alphabetic principle and more because it's a little bit more meaningful in this context. And a lot of people worry like, well, 3-year-olds shouldn't be able to do this, or we shouldn't ask them to do this. But he was interested, and I would argue that maybe you've probably seen a 3-year-old open an app, even maybe change your Wi-Fi password. So if they're interested, they could probably handle decoding the word cat. And so we think that these features together might lead for greater efficiency and efficacy. For the teacher, there's fewer activities to prep. You don't have to have a letter sound in isolation, a phonemic awareness in isolation activity, et cetera, et cetera. You can just put these pieces together in a word building activity like this. So there's less instructional time, but more importantly, we think that it's a faster insight for the child. They're going to get the concept that our written language is a code for sound. And another feature that I hope you see in the videos that we're going to show is that we do this write and say action. In this case, he's not writing because he's before that developmentally, but he's moving and saying. We're always connecting phonemes and graphemes, and that's threaded throughout. And this is in alignment with what Dr. Heron and Dr. Gillis says, quote, encoding is not simply a first step to writing. It is a vital but underappreciated route to reading. So that unlocked the encoding activity, really unlocked the alphabetic principle for him. So What worked in 1995 evaluation, it became visible actually with a brain scan in a study or experiment of 2002 through the work of Simos, Jack Fletcher, and others. They scanned the brains of children with dyslexia before and after a phonologically based intervention. And initially, they started with kids who were initially diagnosed with dyslexia marked by severe difficulties in word recognition and phonologic processing. Notice that left side of the brain before intervention, there's little activation. Those few orange spots is the sign that that's not the side of their brain that they're using to be able to read, which is common with poor readers. Now, after 80 hours of instruction of mostly phonographics and a couple kids with the Linda Mood Lips program, the brain looks much different. There's the left side of the brain after intervention. There's all that orange. That's the activation of the proper side of the brain that shows that they're now typically developing. And that brain change was mirrored by actual achievement gains. The students moved from the lowest percentiles of under 18% into the average range on standardized measures. In fact, 6 of the 8 were at the 3rd percentile in the Woodcock-Johnson, which many of you probably know. That makes for a very challenging kid to read. So this is pretty profound change for these 8 readers, and the brain scans of the control kids didn't really change much, but it was just 2 months. So this is a step up scientifically, so to speak, as compared to the evaluation in 95. But it's not just lab work. We see this stuff happening in the real world. In Alabama, 1st grade teacher Stephanie Bolton used EBLI for the first time just last year. And her students' average reading rate jumped from 42 words per minute to 108 words per minute with 98% accuracy. Given that the Hasbrouck-Tyndall norms suggest about 60 words per minute for the average end of grade 1st grader, these are really incredible scores. And you can see it again with this whopping 184% iReady progress to annual typical growth. And Julie Van Leer has similarly been knocking it out of the park with data she's collected for several years using EBLI with kinders. Notice how her students at a Title I school enter with very low scores. They're in orange in terms of how many are at or above grade level. But by the end of year, 100% or nearly 100%, 4 years running, are at or above grade level. We're not really shocked by this. I mean, this is awesome, but we're not surprised. It's not really a mystery. We think that it flows directly from these core features of linguistic phonics. And the third distinctive is rapid introduction of the advanced code. Rather than waiting for full mastery of the basic code where there's one-to-one mapping, we expose children much earlier to common complex sound spelling patterns. So this also lets them move into authentic text sooner and accelerates progress. In contrast, in a lot of mainstream phonics programs, the advanced code is really slowly over a course of really 2 to 3 years. So for instance, maybe 1 week is the vowel plus E or magic E pattern for long O there. And then the next week, it's going to be just that one spelling of A and then I. And then maybe after a month or several months later, the kids are going to learn that O by itself, like in the word go, is also another O sound. And then it may not be even till the next school year or the next semester that they learn that OA in boat and the OW in show are other common spellings for O. So this drip, drip, drip isolated spellings approach is like handing out one puzzle piece a week and expecting the students to see the full picture. It's just a lot of disconnected information. These files are hard to these folders are just hard to file. It's hard to store, hard to recall. But in contrast, most linguistic phonics programs, we organize the code by sound, which is how the code is designed. The alphabetic principle says that the written language is a code for sound. So we're not organizing by phonics rules or syllable types, but by sound. And students learn that the sound O can be spelled in multiple ways: the O in go, the O in boat, the O in show, the O in toe, the O in home. And they discover these patterns through reading, sorting, and writing real words. So this structure gives them a logical framework for storing and recalling this information. It's a mnemonic, a graphic organizer, a schema So they do maybe say O 1 week, and then they do E 1 week. Here's an example from a couple of different programs. On the left, the targeted reading intervention, which full disclosure, I led the development of from 2005 to 2012. The kids are going to be reading the O sound word, and then they're going to be searching for the matching spelling, and then writing and saying those sounds. So when they write the word grow, they're going to say G, R, O. Similarly, on the right here at Reading Simplified, we do something very similar. So what we're doing is not just releasing the code earlier, we're also releasing the concept of how the code works. Not just that it's one-to-one mapping. A lot of programs are staying in that for a whole year, if not longer, especially if it's like the child is stuck because they haven't mastered it. So we're showing that, this concept that one sound could be multiple spellings, but we're also releasing that information so they have time to use it, practice it, and observe the patterns. And a lot of people are worried that kids can't handle that volume of information. We don't find that to be hard at all. And in fact, we find it makes things easier, probably because of that schema and some of the other things that we've done to prepare the way for this. But perhaps, according to more recent research, a faster pace of releasing this information is appropriate. So this recent Reading League journal says the research suggests a faster pace, such as 1 letter a day. I don't think there's any mainstream phonics program that does 1 letter a day, past the alphabet. So and now this is really cool. So this is going to be the culmination of a lot of these principles that we have talked about so far. When we organize the code by sound, we're drawing on the students' abilities, we're responding to their errors, we're releasing phonics early. You're going to be able to do something pretty impressive like Nora here with his kindergarten group of kids. This is an inner city school in Detroit, and they've only had 4 months of EBLI. But notice that they can handle reading a multi-syllable words and writing them. So this is an extended lesson where Nora has taught how to write the word butterfly, taught how to write the word caterpillar, and then the kids read an informational text about butterfly. But what we hope you notice is how kids are successful. It's something that most programs would never dare try in the middle of kindergarten.
Okay, we're going to do the word butterfly. Butterfly. What's my first piece right here in butterfly? What's the first piece? Please draw a line and say buh. Draw a longer line and say buh. Oh, you need your marker, don't you? No, not gonna. Yeah, say buh. Your line, it needs to be longer than that. These are going to be lines for our whole syllable, not just. All right, ladies and gentlemen, eyes up here. What's our piece right here in butterfly? What's this piece? Listen, butterfly. Buh. Draw a line and say tur. Draw a line and say tur. There you go. That's a point for you guys. Good job. Thank you. Sounds in buh. What's the first sound in buh? Draw a line and say buh. Draw a line and say buh. What's the next sound in buh? We're not to tur. That's over here. We're just going to deal with buh. Thank you. Draw a line and say Draw a line and say Good job. Buh. Now tur. What's the first sound in tur? Draw a line and say t. My lady, we're waiting. Okay. What's our next sound in tur? Butter. What's our last piece? What's the first sound in fly? Okay, you do not need to write this word. I'm the only one that's going to write it at the top. Here's butterfly. We're going to match our spellings to our lines, okay? What's the first sound in buh? The ball. So go ahead and say as you write buh on that first line. Let me hear you. Buh. Say as you write buh. Bat hits the ball at the bottom. Buh. Very nice buh. I like that. Buh. It's it's good enough for me to see. It's okay. We're cool so far. What's our next sound in buh? What are your next? Say as you write Let me hear you. All right, tur. What's the first sound in tur? Gentlemen, everybody, let's circle our t spelling. Circle your t spelling. Circle your t and put 2 lines under it. Cool. I'm glad to hear it. Circle your Put 2 lines under it. Good job, you guys. Go ahead and get your eraser and erase just your letters and leave your lines and your circles. Erase just your letters. How are you going to be able to get it to get it correct? What's your mouth going to be doing as your hand is saying? Or as your hand is writing? Yes, it's going to be saying. I gave you the answer. I want every single sound as you go. So it's going to sound like this. Buh. Go ahead and erase that fly, my darling. Wait, I'm going to be listening for everybody. You're going to do it at the same time. I'm not writing up here. I'm just listening and looking. Erase your letters if you have them. All letters gone. Everybody's voice. What's the first sound in buh? Say as you write it on that line. Let me hear you. Buh. Buh. What's the next sound in buh? Say as you write it. Good job. Now, tur. You go ahead and say those. You write both of those spellings. T. Good job. Now, fly. Say as you write fly. Just tables toward the door. Hold up your boards. Oh. Okay. Those 2 tables can erase. These 2, yes, you can erase. Erase. Let me see yours. You guys can erase. Let me hear you. I need a bat first with that buh. Buh. Let me hear you. Good job with those sounds, sir. A point. You guys are doing great on the sounds. When you have the book, spell the whole word. Hold your board up when you're done. But, you may erase.
Pretty amazing, right? This isn't a gifted group. It's just a typical kindergarten class in a low-income public school. What would a typical kindergarten class be doing at the midpoint of the year? If y'all could put that in the chat, that would be great for those of you who don't have that kindergarten experience. So success like these kindergarten kids that Nora was teaching with EBLI was demonstrated in another experiment of phonographics by the similar research team that had the brain scan study in 2002. And this study of 27 students who had shown weak response to intervention in other studies or prior experiments that they'd been working with these students, the phonographics intervention was delivered for 8 weeks to 2 groups in a multiple baseline design. And then they had 8 weeks of Read Naturally, which was more of a fluency building intervention. And across 16 weeks of interventions, significant improvement was apparent in multiple domains of reading, including decoding, fluency, and comprehension. So here's just what some of that data look like. I'm going to blow up these graphs here. So so we see in group 1, when the phonographics intervention started, a steep improvement in the Woodcock-Johnson word attack. And then also in wave 2, we see another steep, when they got started with phonographics, steep improvement in word attack. Then the Read Naturally fluency building intervention got kicked off, and you could see then continued growth with word identification. And this aligns with what we experience with linguistic phonics approaches. They're really strong at rapidly building that word attack. And then with practice, word identification kicks on. Those strong results in a controlled study, we've seen now 2 types of experiments, an evaluation and several real world examples. It continues on into whole school. Here is like a school in rural Georgia. It's low income. And they had 10 kindergarten classrooms and 10 first grade classrooms. And they implemented Reading Simplified for their first year. And they were doing pretty well already in 2023. But in their first year of implementation, the 10 kindergarten classrooms averaged 94% proficiency on the Dibbles nonsense word fluency. Their first grade group had actually even greater growth. They ended at 93% fluency, 10 classrooms, right? This is a big chunk of people and teachers. So we've seen so far dramatically stronger gains in evaluations, experiments, school-based data. And so we just hope that as a field that we can step back and ask, what if there was a more efficient and effective way? Now, efficiency means also cutting down unnecessary complexity. And we think that's a strength in this 4th distinctive. A linguistic phonics approach emphasizes revealing these patterns of our written language to kids. And we also lean on more on procedural learning, developing the skill of sound-based decoding, the skill of encoding, the skill of blending and segmenting and manipulating, instead of kind of saddling them with a lot of declarative knowledge, such as phonics rules, syllable types, marking syllables. So this allows students to gather more statistical learning, at least earlier, and then apply the set for variability decoding strategy early on. And I'll explain what that means if you've never heard of it, don't worry. So reading researchers of late have demonstrated that after explicit instruction is necessary, of course, at the beginning of reading, most of the code and the words that kids learn are gathered through statistical learning. And that happens because our brains are seeking tendencies and they're seeking patterns. So in a linguistic phonics approach, like many mainstream phonics approaches, we're going to explicitly teach how to break the code, and we're going to really emphasize building decoding and encoding skills. And then we're going to be leaning more in a linguistic phonics approach on self-teaching. They've got these skills. Now they're going to be gathering this information about the code. And then we're going to emphasize a lot of practice, real word practice, reading authentic text with the teacher responding to the student's response. So we think that without a lot of declarative knowledge, a lot of labels to learn and fewer strategies to turn to, we lower the cognitive load. Kids are learning decoding strategies, not syllabication types. And we think this aligns with what Dr. Mark Seidenberg says. We aim to get in, get out, and move on. More recently, Scher's Universal Blueprint, which is an RRQ article, reiterates this idea about how kids learn to read. He says learning to read relies on multiple nested levels of knowledge emerging partly as a result of explicit instruction, but primarily as the result of massive implicit or statistical learning. I think that tension is the difference, one of the differences here with a lot of mainstream phonics programs and a linguistic phonics approach. We're going to be leaning heavily on the statistical. We're going to prepare them earlier, in my opinion, than a lot of traditional approaches. We see the same thing echoed by
Marnie, you're muted.
Thank you. So in case you didn't catch it, I was just emphasizing that Emily Hanford had said that some schools may be going overboard. She gathered that when she interviewed Dr. Seidenberg, and he said, quote, "I think there's a failure to distinguish what a teacher might need to know about how language works and how reading works and what a kid needs to learn." And so he talks about, hey, there's this other thing. We're not really emphasizing a lot about statistical learning. So Hanford says, quote, "Mark says the goal of reading instruction should not be to teach kids everything they need to know. It should be to teach them enough so that this implicit or statistical learning can kick in." And that where that line is tricky. And we think we just need to keep discussing it as a field. But if you don't give kids opportunities to observe patterns, we're going to be limiting the and we're just going to be limiting their opportunities for statistical learning, because when we're limiting them to the simplest spellings, staying for a whole year in one-to-one mapping with short vowels, we're just blocking the ability to absorb that information. We need to release it faster and in a more organized way, in my opinion. So when kids have a better statistical learning ability and maybe their decoding and encoding skills are stronger, then they can apply the second decoding strategy that researchers term set for variability, which means mispronunciation correction. That is flexibly decoding a misread word in order to reach the correct reading. For instance, if the child reads the word down as done, she has to recognize, first, that's not a word. Second, she has to pull out the O and plug in the ow, and that's a phonemic manipulation skill. And then she has to try it again, down, and then acknowledge that that's a real meaningful word. And that's sophisticated. And a lot of historically, we haven't really taught that. Our common formula for explaining how kids learn to read is letter sounds plus blending equals decoding. And this newer research is suggesting that that's insufficient. It's really, you've got to have the letter sounds. Yes, you have to teach a blending strategy, but you also have to teach kids the set for variability, how to cope when they misread a word. That's going to give you the decoding skills. So we're going to see a couple examples of this. Here's a first grader attempting the word guess. She says, g, she glances at the end of the word, and then she figures it out because she's searching for meaning while she decodes that set for variability.
No. You cannot look. Guess.
Nice figuring out there. Guess.
So you can also see maybe how this is played out with this dichotomy here. If there's a program that requires a lot of declarative knowledge, you have to label things, learn rules, apply an algorithm. Like if it's an open syllable, then I have to apply short vowel, long vowel. Then that is potentially increasing cognitive load, where on the left, the student is relying more heavily on blending and set for variability. So this is an example of a kid, an older student, using set for variability. Also notice they're a blending skill with the word redcoats, which they also had trouble with.
Soldiers, Red Coast crowd, Red Coast Guards.
This is a word you may not know.
Red coats.
Nice.
Red coats crowded the streets.
Okay, what do you think based on the picture that redcoats are?
Like their suits, kind of.
And whose soldier uniforms are these?
British.
Yes, that's right.
British. crowd the streets. Alex became in the
Alex became
a parrot, a patriot,
Mhm.
patriot oat,
Good try.
patriot.
Nice fixing. I like how you did that.
He
He became a patriot. What does that mean?
I don't know.
It's someone who's faithful to in this case, the new government.
So he's connecting all of those things, the sounds, the print, the meaning, and he has the skills that he's been developing from the previous principles of linguistic phonics that enables him to do that. We have other evaluations. We're not just confident about this approach because there's a couple of pockets here or there. We kind of have a lot all over the world. So here's a recent evaluation by the American Institutes for Research. 2 low-income schools implemented Reading Simplified across grades K through 2. Over the course of 1 year, they saw consistent gains. Notice these large effect sizes for K1 and 2. Also notice here in the first triangle at the beginning of the year, over half of the kids were well below benchmark, K2 on the Dibbles, 450 kids. By the end of the year, in this 1 year of Reading Simplified, the well below benchmark had dropped to 17 kids. So they grew from 30% proficient to 70% proficient. And it's not just elementary. Here is the real world data of Catherine Pierre in the Cook Islands. I want to go visit. Maybe there's somebody there who needs me to do PD. I would love to go. It's like Hawaii, I hear. And she gave a standardized test on the BERT word reading, the BERT word reading test with 30 struggling readers. Like, we need to give our hats off for her. She's teaching middle school struggling readers. If you've done that, you know she deserves praise. They only had in 2021 17 weeks of Reading Simplified instruction, and they grew for almost 4 years on this standardized measure. This is not what you see typically with middle school kids. What are middle school kids typically doing? Stagnating or dropping. And it ain't just middle school. We have some really amazing data from a while back with EBLI, with high school kids, even indeed special education kids. Dr. Matt Burns did this analysis using the Woodcock diagnostic reading battery, and they only had 5 hours, a little bit more than 5 hours. It's kind of crazy, but this is their before and after in terms of what percentage of those kids, the 19 special ed kids, were at or above grade level. You can see dramatic gains for word identification, word attack, vocabulary, and comprehension. Those yielded these whopping big effect sizes. Remember, we're talking about 5 hours, which I've personally experienced, so I know this is not, I trust this data. 1.95 word ID, 2.52 in word attack, and even almost near year 1 effect size gain in comprehension. And then average grade level skyrocketed. Check out word identification. It went to the 10th grade level, 3.5 or more years of growth. Word attack went to basically college levels, 14 grade level, 9 years growth. And I've also witnessed this with high school kids. So it's, we actually see the biggest growth typically with middle and high school kids. And the fifth distinctive that we think is useful when we discuss the linguistic phonics method is that we're trying to be really responsive to students, and we're trying to give them immediate feedback, whether it's whole group, small group, or one-on-one. This is for their reading mistakes and their writing mistakes. We're actually looking for errors. We're not trying to shun them. And this hopefully is an example of several of these features that we've been talking about coming together. So we're going to respond to the student's response in this video. We're going to orient towards his speech, combine multiple sub-processes simultaneously, and mainly, I think we hope that you notice that his speed of progress is really profound. This is a struggling kindergarten reader in November who had been identified by his teacher as struggling. He knew 6-letter sounds. He could not segment a CVC word. And what I did was 5 days in a row of just this one activity, of a word chaining activity. And I did that not because that's a comprehensive lesson, but just to show the power of integrating multiple sub-processes simultaneously. So it was literally just 8 minutes of 5 days in a row of just this activity, because what would he normally be doing if he didn't know his short vowels? The teacher would be spending a whole week on snake, or maybe apple. and the phonological awareness activities. But when we put the pieces together, like we started off at the beginning of the presentation with integrating sub-processes and revealing the alphabetic principle, a lot more can happen. So what you're going to see is snippets from 5 days in a row. I want you to notice how many different skills are being practiced, but most importantly, how far he comes, because this activity is, we think, more efficient and efficacious.
The first word that I'm going to ask you to build is the word Sam, like a guy's name. What do you hear right here when I say Sam? That's right, that's the letter name, but what sound comes out of my mouth? That's right, which one of these is S? You got it. Okay, pull it down and say S. And again, because of Facebook's, this looks backwards to you guys, but it's left to right as it should be for him. Now let's focus on what's the next sound that you hear in Sam.
M.
You're so right. There is a that's coming over here, but I'm looking for this sound. I want you to listen really.
O.
I don't want you to think about what letter it is. First of all, I just want you to pay attention to my voice and your voice. What do you hear right here when I say Sam? What was coming out of my mouth right there?
B.
Sam.
N.
Sam. What comes out right there? Sam.
N.
Well, there is a you know what? Which one of these is That's ah. This is Let's put that one down there. So you got the but what sound do we hear right here when I say Sam? You got it. You heard it. That's ah. So you have map, and we need mat. Oh, I like how you stay there. Ah. Okay, so you got rid of the pup in map, but we're using mat. Oh, you're hearing it. Very nice. Which one is t? Very good. You know what to do next? And the word is?
Mat.
Wow. You got soft. We need to switch it to
Wait,
sift. You have soft. Switch it to sift. Get rid of the ah, that's right. What sound goes here to make sift? Which is it? It. Just say it. Sift. If you sift something, you separate it. Okay, let's check the sounds in sift. You have plot.
No.
Yep. Okay, plod.
Where's D? Is there any D on here?
Yes.
There we go.
And what sound is it at the end of plod? Check the sounds, and you got maybe one more. Nope, we're doing the word plod.
Oh.
Plod. Duh. That's a good fit. Okay, let's check the sounds in stump. And the word is? Can you take away two things? Two things we're going to do to change stump to stun. Stun. Oh, that is so good. He got both of them. I didn't know if that was possible. We need to make stun. Which one is That's O. You nailed it. Okay, I'm stunned that you did it. Okay, check the sounds in stun. It's hard thinking about that, isn't it? Stun. And the last one? Stun. Very nice.
So look at his really remarkable progress on the bottom line. You can see he went from not being able to segment a 3-sound word like sun, on the weekend, and on Friday he could not only segment a 5-sound word, but he could manipulate them, which is a harder phonemic awareness task. And then the columns represent all the letter sounds that he gathered, all the short vowels, even some consonant digraphs. He really learned about 13 letter sounds in 1 week. And that's not because he was special or there was anything unique here. It was just that the activity is very efficient, and it was drawing on his sounds, giving him feedback and connecting all the pieces together with the concrete representations of the sounds and words with the lines and the letters. And it's just not that unusual to get that kind of strong growth. And then, so we're kind of saving some of the biggest heavy hitters for the end. We even have randomized controlled trials of these types of approaches. So if you go to Evidence for ESSA and look at their strong studies, that means studies that have been good experiments, like it's good research, not that it's a good program. And if you look at most of their effect sizes, you can see most of them are below the 0.4 mark, which is not considered that of educationally significant. Curiously, 3 of the ones with some of the highest effect sizes are a linguistics phonics approach. The targeted reading intervention has many studies on it. It doesn't actually get kids caught up, but it's only 5 hours, and yet it's still one of the higher effect sizes. Now, there's a lot of things that go into comparing effect sizes, but it's still, again, we hope it should make you curious. You can also see the same high quality studies according to What Works Clearinghouse through these same programs, LIPS, Read, Write, and Type, and the targeted reading intervention. So there are some robust randomized controlled trials behind this approach, not just our anecdotal data, not just school-based data, not just evaluations. And then there's even the evaluation of many kids. Sounds Right, several years ago, gathered data from 24 schools in England, and they had 1,600 kids take the parallel spelling tests after getting Sounds Right instruction, another linguistic phonics approach. And they noticed then that 91% of those 1,600 kids were within 6 months of age expected spelling ability at the end of year 2, whereas in the bottom row there, you can see what would be expected, that only about half of the kids. So they way outpaced that. So I hope I know this is a lot, but I hope you're gathering some of this as maybe a little different than what you've seen the mainstream. Remember, we're talking about how speech is the foundation of teaching reading. We're going to be drawing from what the kid brings to us day 1. And we're going to integrate instruction across reading, writing, phonics, and phonemic awareness simultaneously. Again, really early on, not in week 13. And we're going to reveal the advanced code, advanced phonics, extended code much earlier, which gets us into authentic text earlier. We're going to emphasize kids' ability to pay attention to patterns, more on procedural learning like sound-based decoding, less on declarative knowledge like rules and syllable types. That builds up their ability to gather statistical knowledge about the code and also use the set for variability decoding strategy. And then we're going to be really responsive to their needs, even in a whole class setting. I saw in the chat that there's some examples of how programs accomplish that. So we hope that this has made you curious about learning more if you're not familiar with this type of approach. Maybe we'd love to see the field be a little bit more curious about the what and the how of phonics instruction, or how we teach decoding, how we teach those foundational skills. Maybe some of this information about different theories like statistical learning, set for variability, is going to give you a different lens on how you think about the program that you have, and maybe how you think about a linguistic phonics approach. And of course, we'd love more research. Anyone who's got the big bucks or time or energy that would like to pursue more. We're not suggesting that this information that we've shared is a slam dunk, but we think it is really strong circumstantial evidence that looking more in depth at how we're teaching foundational skills with this variation on synthetic phonics may be a way to improve the outcomes that we're seeing. And so we also have more information, a lot of the things that we've cited, and information from people that provide instruction and professional development on these types of approaches. So if you gather your phone, I'd love to see that. Thank you. Grab that QR code, and you can find more links to read further. We know we've just, given you a lot in a short period of time. So thank you for hanging with us. Have you gotten that QR code? Is it gotten? We'd like to make sure everybody's gotten that. Well, I will come back to it, but we do want to say thank you so much. Thank you for giving us your time. And we're going to pass it over to Donna for questions. We hope that we can have a good discussion with all of you.
Thank you so much, Marnie, as usual. Well done, very informative. And we are here because of this kind of phenomenon that I've been experiencing and seeing with the efficacy of this approach. And so that's what motivated me to know more. So if you are curious about this, before we get started with our Q&A, I would like to know if you're interested in the chat, please mark down a yes if you would like to know more about this approach, because we're thinking of putting together maybe a mini series or something to inform people more, because tonight was like, woo, like whirlwind, but there's more to be learned. So thank you for doing that. What we're going to start with tonight are some of the questions that came out over and over and over again. And we have our panel of experts that are going to answer them. So Jen, I think this one might be for you. Much of what I hear is also done in Orton Gillingham programs. What's the difference?
Yeah, so I saw that question coming up in the chat. And I remember as an former Orton Gillingham practitioner, when I first learned about this, having that same question. And it honestly took a while for it to kind of settle in, because on the surface, I think a lot of these activities feel similar. But once you start digging a little bit deeper, you realize that the whole paradigm is coming at teaching from just a different angle. And because of that different angle, and starting from speech as opposed to letters on the page, and focusing on patterns and tendencies as opposed to teaching syllable types, rules for breaking things, teaching names for certain types of graphemes, all of that, what felt so important to me at the time, because it felt like the best way to teach kids who were struggling, ended up feeling more like a little bit of noise and clutter. And once I could get that out of the way, it was incredible how kids really started sucking up the information, and just their whole demeanor changed because it made more sense to them. So I don't know if that answers that question sufficiently, if somebody else wants to chime in.
So anyone else?
I can add a little bit to that too.
Okay.
Like Jen, I was also trained in Orton Gillingham and had, various experiences one-on-one in classroom. And what I felt with it was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the answer. I'm giving them all the things. I'm telling them everything super explicitly. And if they just follow this, they're going to get it and we're going to get there. But it took forever. And it wasn't exciting. It wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable for me as a teacher, because I felt burdened by all the different drills and am I saying it right? And am I doing it right? And all these cards and materials. And do I have to prep for this? And do I have time for this? I don't think I do. Let's just skip that part. And I don't know all the syllable types still. I still couldn't tell you those syllable types, but I was trained in it and I couldn't understand it. So I'm thinking, if I can't understand this, how am I supposed to teach this to the child? But then again, I'm like, well, this is supposed to work. Yet I wasn't seeing those big aha moments. When I found this speech first paradigm, the Diane McGinnis prototype mainly, through EBLI, through Reading Simplified, I did phonographics as well. And when I picked up David Kilpatrick's book and I read the study he put in there with the high effect size and standard gains of after 12 hours of phonographics, I thought, I gotta get this. What's phonographics? I never heard of it. I've been in the classroom for 15, almost 20 years. So then I dug and I tried it and I did it. And I've never seen those light bulbs before with anything else. So that, I don't know if that explains the difference, but it's the difference. And the difference is the paradigm shift, in that we are starting with pronunciation of words. We're going to say the word, what are the sounds, and we're going to just put it all together right away. We're focusing on the doing, knowing how to play the game, and actually playing the game and reading real books and spending most of our time with that, rather than spending most of the time on drills and trying to memorize graphemes before I could play the game with them. And that's what I'm going to stop.
Okay, along those lines then, teachers want to know, can I teach linguistic phonics and OG together, or add some of the components to print to speech instruction? Anyone?
I would say Jen and Svetlana, since they've both taught both, would be ideal to answer this.
I'm happy to start it off again. So yeah, I think that is a sort of logical inclination, especially when you've invested a lot of time and effort into learning an approach and you get some results from it. But I would encourage people to think twice before doing it, because I think both from a teacher standpoint and a student learning standpoint, it's going to create some cognitive dissonance. And in my experience, when I've worked with students using I use EBLI, teaching from a speech differential approach, and then they go back into their classroom and they're getting a heavy dose of something that's, an Orton-Gillingham derivative for classrooms. There are some kids, not all, who really start to find it confusing and frustrating, and it slows down their progress. So I think I would encourage people to not mix and match.
Can you hear me? I'm Barbara Offenbacher, and I'm a speech and language therapist for decades. And I can honestly tell you from my own experiences that a speech approach is just such a valid next step in terms of the year or 2 or 3 that you're taking to learn the speech phonology of what's going on and then associate it. So very quickly, I'm going to tell you a very fast story. My own children, I used to have an ABC chart around their bedrooms. And at night is like a calm down before it's time to go to sleep. We would say goodnight to each card, but we would say goodnight, and there would be an apple. Goodnight, balloon, whatever. You get the point. And that was, when we got to Z, it was good night and we go to the pillow. But for them, hearing speech and learning speech and getting the sound and then associating it with something was a very developmentally flowing, natural kind of way. And they're great readers. And that's what I do with every kid that I work with all the time for decades of years. So you can do it.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go on to something in this vein about early readers. So how and when do we teach the ABCs and letter sounds? Nora, would you take that?
Sure. This is a really good question, because this one is just a really huge cognitive dissonance when we're used to doing them, the letters, names, and sounds in isolation. And we start even as early as 3 years old. Because we teach with speech first, we have to have a word. So we teach what sounds go with what letters in the context of a word. So you saw Marnie making the word map with that little 3-year-old. And, what's the first sound in map? He knew what the was. He didn't know what the a was. And she just told him. What she's doing there is explicitly teaching him what sounds are represented by what spellings. And so we do that in a way that's meaningful and relevant. And so that that part really accelerates how well they integrate what letters go with what sounds. Now, how we teach the letter names, but we kind of think of it as like the sounds are like your first names. That's what we really need to use to read and spell. That's what we need to access. And the letter names are kind of like your middle names. They're great. We want to have them. We don't want to get rid of them, but we don't want to confuse them, because there's a lot of letter name interference, we call it, that happens when they're learning them, simultaneously. So we try to separate those. What we do with EBLI anyway is we teach the letter names in the context of our handwriting instruction. And we teach the sounds, because with sounds first, you can't really do the letter names in the actual instruction with the reading and spelling. So that we don't have to do any isolated instruction of any sounds. We do that all the way through with everything. And that's how they pick up what sounds are represented by what letters.
Okay, so along those lines, how do I determine what patterns I need to teach in kindergarten? See, Nora and Marnie.
Well, what we do is we teach 4 sounds a week starting in kindergarten. So the first week we'll teach 4 letters and the sounds that go with them. And they always have a vowel in this group of 4 to integrate, and then they integrate them. And you can't make very many words with 4, but the next week you teach 4 more. So now you have 8, and that's exciting. And then you have 4 more. So it's not like these are the exact ones that they have to be, but we do, the vowels that are a little easier, the and that type of thing at the beginning, and things like and whatever. So all of us who have these types of approaches may definitely do it a little bit differently, but not much, because our whole goal is to very quickly get these kids so that they have all the one-letter spelling, so that we can move on to what, that more advanced code where, pretty much all books except for decodable books are going to have in them, even for young children's books.
Okay. Marnie, did you want to talk about that at all?
I think that was good. There's probably
Okay.
one more question.
Thanks, Marnie.
Let's see. How does a teacher provide immediate feedback when teaching this whole class instead of just one-on-one or small group?
I'd like to answer that one if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, we, this is integrated, the procedures for providing support and error correction is integrated into every activity that we teach. And we also utilize whiteboards, pretty big whiteboards actually, with EBLI, and most of us who teach this way. And so that you can hold up and be diagnostic and prescriptive about what everyone is doing. You can see who's made a mistake, and we provide the error correction, right at the front. There's a lot of procedures that are built in so that the error correction can happen immediately, and that what's embedded in the students' neural pathways actually is the correct information, instead of have that incorrect information kind of linger there. So there's
Okay.
lots of ways to do that, whether it's teaching a class of 10 or a class of over 50, which I've done before. So the whiteboards really help a lot.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. I know this is on everyone's mind about special needs kids. Can you share your experiences about teaching special needs kids, either Nora or Marnie or Jen or Svetlana? Svetlana, I know you have a new experience to share, if you would, or maybe not. I don't know.
Do you want to go ahead, Svetlana?
I can share. I wrote it in the chat too, so I don't know who it was now, but yeah, I had a parent insist on flying me over to Chicago. I live in San Diego. I was working with her daughter, who was severely impaired in terms of she'd suffered from frontal lobal seizures until she was 3 years old. She continued having seizures throughout. Last one was in 2017. She's now a 7th grader. She had probably the worst working memory capacity I've ever experienced. I mean, it was virtually zero, where I would teach her a sound letter correspondence and she couldn't remember that pairing at all. And so we had worked over the last year via Zoom, and I was just showing her, just trying to break the concept of the alphabetic principle with her. Number one, she was a huge guesser, compensating for the fact that she didn't understand how the code worked and didn't have the working memory capacity to even handle understanding such an organizational schema. And so I came here, I'm on day 2, and it's really nothing short of a miracle what I've been experiencing with this child. She wrote 2 full sentences today all by herself with my immediate feedback. She was sounding and writing about her kitten. That I said, what do you want to write about? And this is, mind you, after 2.5 hours of intense, we were doing all kinds of things, but now she's excited. She knows how the code works. She wants to read. She wants to write and doesn't want to leave. And I've been working for her. I did 2.5 hours yesterday, 2.5 hours today. And I could never say I could do that with using any other approach, or be confident enough to even go and fly over somewhere and say, hey, yeah, I can help your daughter. And sure enough, I am. And it's really a miracle. So I've learned more than I ever have, in these 2 days. And it's been really, really exciting.
I know you've mentioned before about working memory too. And I think that's part of the success of this program is that it doesn't require or You know, maybe Svetlana, you could address that a little bit about the working memory issues.
I think that's a really huge thing, Donna, and that's why I emphasize the whole procedural thing. The working memory capacity, right, can only hold 5 to 7 chunks of information. So because of this schema, the organizational schema of how we present the code to the child, they're able to chunk it down in a very logical and manageable way, right? I'm not going to show them a laundry list of 200 plus graphemes that they're going to have to memorize sequentially before they can get to the next one. I'm going to organize it and say, you know what, we're going to learn. Well, first of all, we have to establish the alphabetic principle, and you're gonna, just the one-to-one correspondence, and they have to have enough under their belt there, like Nora was saying in kindergarten, or with any, not so much any, but they want that one-to-one correspondence, and they hold on to it, they get it. But now I'm gonna go, okay, well, here's how the code works. We have the sound E. And guess what? In this system, there's lots of ways to spell E, but for today, I'm going to show you the 4 most common ones. And they come up a lot in a lot of different words in a lot of different ways, and big words and small words. And here they are. Okay, these are all E. This is E, which EA, right? This is E, EE. And we're organizing it on their whiteboard, and they're interacting. I'm not just showing them. The difference is I write a word, they read the word, I'm there to help them sound it out, and then they're going to write that word under a category of the sound spelling. So it's EA or EE. And that interaction, that dynamic is really securing the pronunciation of the word. I read the word team. I looked at those patterns, and now I'm going to categorize because our brains are pattern seekers, right? So I'm going to look where it is, and now I'm going to write it, and I'm going to say the sounds as I write. That's another thing that I think is a huge magical piece of this linguistic phonics approach, because they're integrating all the things, the visual, the auditory, I'm sorry, the speech, the auditory, everything's happening at the same time, and they're connecting and securing that real strong bond that we know happens when we take a word and bring it to memory, right? And it's going to take a couple times, maybe 2, maybe 3 or 4, whatever. We know how orthographic mapping works, but this young girl, again, can handle that, because now I'm showing her how this all works, and it's organized in a way. Now, okay, well, we did E. Now we're going to go to the next really common spelling, and I'm also showing her an overlap as well. But again, this is all happening in a very manageable way that the working memory can handle and chunk it, and then we're going off. And I'm not forcing her to mastery. I'm asking her to do the things so that she understands this code and the principle behind it. And now we're working toward mastery. She's not a stellar reader right now, but she knows what to do, and she knows how to do it. And I'm there to hold her hand through it. So there's no pressure, and she's just doing it, and it's amazing.
Excellent. That's so wonderful for her.
Donna, I'd like to
and-
follow. Can I follow up on that?
Yes, of course.
Because I've talked to so many different linguistic phonics teachers over the years, and I've been tutoring kids for 25 years, and I assess them on the Woodcock Reading Mastery before and some other things, and I assess them afterwards. And I love all the things that Svetlana talked about, and it's so true, and there's ways to reach our truly special needs kids. But what I observed from all this tutoring over the years is that most of the kids that I assess who are well below grade level don't actually have special needs. And we can kind of see that in that data from Nora's of those special ed kids. They were in high school, they were 10th graders. They went from the 5th grade in word attack to 14 grade level in 5 hours. Is that a disability that's is that possible to couple that with disability? That's probably just an instructional failure. And I've seen that over and over again. Like, one student sticks out to me. He was in an upper middle class school district, and he was a 10th grader. He had just been diagnosed with dyslexia, which is really inappropriate to be diagnosed that late. His word attack was a 1.8, which means first grade, 8th month. So no wonder he was struggling. I did 12 hours of this kind of instruction. His mom read with him in between sessions, and he finished after 12 hours at the 10th grade level on word attack. That's not was he really dyslexic? I don't know. But we also saw the CMOS studies of those kids were really hard, having trouble, and they got to grade level after an intense but still brief 2-month period. So there definitely are kids that are still going to be hard for us, and we're going to take long
Mhm.
them, or it's going to certainly even take longer for them to become fluent. I think they crack the code more quickly than mainstream programs, and then they feel like, oh my gosh, I can do this. But there's a lot of work that still has to go in when they're reading and they're writing. And then they have to practice extensively, and then they become fluent. So it
Mhm.
takes more hours. But my experience is that that cluster of kids with true disabilities is really much smaller than the data suggests. And then we just kind of have an MTSS or RTI approach, like give them what they need, and then if it takes longer, then that's kind of like, okay, they've got such special needs.
They never got what they needed,
I want to
basically.
jump on that too, Marnie, which I really appreciate you saying that because it's so critical and important. But there are those kids who have, I think of Sandra Kemet, who she's probably not on here because one of her kids is in the hospital, but she has 4 kids who with severe dyslexia, dysgraphia, DLD, one with a brain tumor, one with seizures, all kinds of things. Well, all 4 of her kids that are really profound. And she had worked in, I think of her oldest was in 7th grade when she started work at teaching this way. And he'd had 7 years of one-on-one, print to speech remediation, was still at a 1st grade reading level. And when she started learning or teaching him with EBLI, in 6 months, he was at a 7th grade level. Now, we think 6 months, okay, that's a lot more than 12 hours typically, of course, and she's homeschooling him and all. However, it's a whole lot less than 6 years. So even, this rewiring of the brain, that those brain imaging, like I want somebody with a brain imaging machine that shows all kinds of kids what is possible, even if you have really significant, disabilities that truly take that longer time, it's still a whole lot faster. And we don't have to think, well, they're probably always going to be at a 1st or 2nd grade level, because that doesn't have to be the case. And it's really critical that we open our mind to what's possible for all of these kids, and moving them to where they are capable of being, which is exciting.
Thank you. Okay, both of you ladies, what programs are linguistic phonics based on Diane McGinnis's work?
Marnie,
Which program
where's
are
Marnie?
out there?
Have you got that one?
Maybe I'll bring up that slide. We've got one, and
The
frankly,
tree?
this is not even all of the approaches. This is just um, my little study, and I know there are others. Afterwards, people said, hey, why isn't this program or that program? But if you look at, I tried to make it like a true family truth, so that the roots of really why children can't read also moves out of lips and the Montessori work. It's over 100 years. And then there was this bizarre study of 1995 of phonographics, and then above that, off to the left, are a lot of programs that really
We
are.
don't see her. We don't see her. I don't see it.
Okay, let's try that again. Sorry.
Oh, I can see it.
Okay, maybe it's me. I have 2 screens up.
I see her. I do.
I'm
see
sure it's me. No doubt.
We're good. I see
So
it.
we've got like sound. We showed today some data from, of course, EBLI and Reading Simplified. Sounds right. But there's also good evidence from Discover Reading, which was in the Dr. David Kilpatrick put that into his Essentials book. Yeah, so you can see there.
So are these programs on state lists?
Some are. It's very challenging to get on the state lists because the state is looking for this traditional paradigm, which is one of the reasons we think this is really important to have this discussion. In Virginia, we got Reading Simplified was accepted for intervention, but it was denied in supplemental. And the sticking point in supplemental was that the kindergarten kids did not have phonological awareness first before they got to print, which it's just like not in alignment with contemporary research. We've known this from the 80s, but it's like something that is believed to be science of reading. And so that was just like, anecdotally our experience. So Reading Simplified is in Colorado and Ohio and Virginia, only on intervention, Oklahoma. Those are the ones I remember.
Yeah, I'm going to say from our experience with the lists, it's, first of all, as Marnie knows, it's like writing a dissertation. It is a ton of work. Like these bigger programs have somebody that they hire just to do that. So it's a lot of time and energy. And almost all of the questions are along with print to speech. How do you teach the syllable types? How do you teach the phonics rules? How do you do the articulation gestures? What do you, all things that we don't do. So that makes it challenging. We just got on the list for Montgomery County, Maryland, which is very exciting. Just trained some of their teachers, but we have applied for a few, got denied. Like Virginia actually wouldn't even look at ours because of a variety of things that they said they don't like, they don't even want to look at it. Like they wouldn't even look at it. And I'm not exactly sure why. We appealed it because we had somebody who was, on and helped. She was coaching us, and she's actually a reader for the state. And she was just like, this is the best application I've seen, and why it didn't get. But the other thing is there's 50 states, and they all have different times with a 2-week window, or sometimes a little bit longer, but 2 weeks. You apply in this 2-week window, and if you don't know about it, which it's not readily available, quite honestly, you have to dig to find that stuff too. It's just this whole, and it's very much, I know Marnie said I used to have this much as, materials that I did, and then I had to go and add all of these things. It's really not what she does that makes it the most efficient, to add it to make it seem more like the other things. So it's a very interesting, crazy situation with those of us who are independent and don't have a lot of money or people to hire to do that on their own. It's stacked against us, that's for sure. So, but people still, use it, and that's good. And we're waiting for Colorado. They seem fairly reasonable. We're going to apply for that because we have a lot of interest there. We also have, when a lot of schools or districts ask us to please apply like they did in Virginia, we will do it, but it's a really heavy lift to ask.
So along those lines, how are teachers or schools reconciling this with their district adaptations and requirements to teacher to standards? So I know there's some people on tonight that have had some conflict within their district, on what they were using, and it sometimes is challenging for the teacher to see such good results and to not get your support of your district.
I think Julie Van Leer is on, and I think she would be a good one to address it because she paid for her own training and has had these great results, that her principal's very impressed with. She might be able to.
I'm here. Can you repeat that question though?
Sure. How are teachers and schools reconciling this with their district adaptations and requirements?
I closed the door and I did it my own way. My district still uses a balanced literacy approach, and I can't undo what I've learned. And I think, is it nurses that take an oath to always do no harm? I can't go in and I can't teach and purposely waste taxpayer dollars doing the wrong thing. My principal is really on board. There's other teachers on board. The problem is it's over and above administrators who have never set foot in a classroom or have never set foot in an elementary classroom where they've taught kids to read. So I would just say close your door and do your own thing. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask permission. That's my motto.
I can speak into that if
sure
as well, just to piggyback. My name's Tara Thompson. I'm a reading coach in South Carolina, and I have been working with my teachers and using Reading Simplified for quite a while. And we have recently come under a new adoption, which people are supposed to be following. And I feel like I've taken the scope and sequence of the district to honor that, but also integrated the key sentences. So the first time that, for example, the long O sound comes up, we teach that. They have to teach what they're supposed to teach. but we integrate the key sentence teaching. And
Mm.
it's really worked quite lovely. And so because we're not asking for mastery, we are planting the seeds so that they can see those patterns and the other representations of those sounds. We're not withholding that information. And I'm happy to speak to people about it and have advocated for it, for the freedom to be able to do that, because you can't wait until Unit 5 to teach OA makes the O sound when you've taught O vowel, O consonant E earlier on. So it just makes sense to plant the seeds. And I think it's just a way to compromise. This is easily embedded into it. And I think we found a really nice way to integrate it in.
That's a great response and informative for teachers, because I think some people think, oh, I have to just use this exclusively. But if you have that knowledge of what to do, you
Right.
can easily infuse
You know,
that.
I want to say to that too, that's really great because all of this kind of approach, it's not necessarily a program as much as an approach where it's
Right.
ecumenical. It doesn't matter if it includes reading, writing, and spelling, this kind of an instruction can be used with all of it. It moves faster than most, so it's going to kind of move ahead quicker through, that slower curriculum, but it doesn't matter if you're reading science or history or about recycling or whatever, even math story problems. Reading is reading. So it doesn't matter which, what you have as far as for your reading curriculum, delivering it in a different manner is what a lot of our schools. We're in all 50 states, and we have, they integrate it, into those other curriculums because they're just doing the process.
I like
Yeah, again, knowledge is power, right? You can, once you learn that.
I like
Okay.
to Donna, I like to frame it as like acceleration. So if the curriculum that you're mandated to do says we're going to teach short A, then we can do that switch it activity, that word chaining activity that we saw the 5 days in a row. We can do that, and that's acceleration. So it's hard for a principal to say, no, I don't want you to accelerate the kids. So if you can say, yeah, I'm doing this thing. It says short A. You can maybe do these worksheets or whatever it is that's mandated. And we're covering it, but we're also just going to teach M, S, T, P, and O.
Okay.
And how to
Thank
segment
you.
and how to manipulate and the alphabetic principle.
Eileen, can you, she had a question. Is she there? Maybe not. She was. Okay. I don't see her. Okay. I'm going to do one more, and I want to answer the question about if a child, this is from Arnie, if a child is not familiar with the word, never heard of it, how do they use set for variability? How can they guess the correct pronunciation if they never heard the word?
Right. So remember, set for variability is also an easier term as mispronunciation correction. So when a child comes across a word that they don't know, they're going to try to decode it, and they're going to maybe get close, and they maybe stumble a lot. So they're going to stumble if they've never heard the word, regardless of what program you are teaching. So we're not saying that this skill is going to instantly give kids the entire lexicon of meanings. And no other program would as well. So if a kid doesn't know patriot, like this boy actually didn't know it in the video, he decoded it and he kind of figured it out, maybe because he'd heard it, because there's a larger number of words that you may have heard but you don't know the meaning of, which is a smaller body of words, or maybe because he thought that the rhythm of that word sounded better. But we still are going to immediately help them with the meaning. So if he just kept stumbling and I'd given him some more prompts and he couldn't come up with patriot, I would say, well, this is actually the word patriot, and a patriot is someone who blah, 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 blah. So, and that's kind of the same thing that you would have to do if they had stumbled through applying an algorithm for syllable types. They could have, because every syllable, like as Dr. Devin Kearns has revealed, a lot of those syllable types are, not much better than the flip of a coin. So a kid's going to still get stuck. So the question is, what do they do then? So regardless of what approach you use, we're going to still need to define and elaborate on words. And Yeah, so I think it's not different with a linguistic phonics approach. It's just that we're going to most likely, in my opinion, give them the stronger decoding skills so that they're more quickly able to attack it and play around with those sounds so they can get closer to the real word. I think that's why he was able to do Patriot, because, like I said, he didn't even really know it. It's not in terms of the lexical quality hypothesis, he didn't have good lexical knowledge of that word, but he was close enough, and then the teacher should support and scaffold his vocabulary meaning.
Donna,
Correct.
Eileen is
Yes.
back in.
Okay, great.
Before Eileen is there,
Oh,
can I just quickly piggyback on Marnie's? Because I see something in the chat that somebody asked that's a really
Sure.
relevant question that has to do, isn't it just better if kids are struggling with a word to just jump in and give it to them? And I think that's the other piece about linguistic phonics approaches, is that productive struggle, just sort of the right level of struggle, is so valuable. It's such a wonderful teaching opportunity because you're there supporting them. So you're not letting them flounder, but it's an opportunity to really have them shine their flashlight on a pattern, a spelling pattern, and link it to a pronunciation in a way that you're giving them chances to learn in a manner that's supportive. So while it may sound like, kids are working too hard, it's teaching them how to go about doing this.
Thank you. All right.
Well,
now,
and they're enjoying it. There's not a frustration, even with this girl who has, all the deficits you can think of, the phonological, the working memory. She has every deficit you can list. She has it, ADHD. She is enjoying herself. She is working hard, but she's also getting the same amount of success paired with that. And so she's motivated by that immediate success. And that's what this is for all the kids, kindergartners, anybody.
absolutely.
So
Okay.
so my phone died just as I was about to speak.
Oh.
And I was like, ah! So I'm now plugged in the kitchen. It's still light out in Washington State. So couple of things. First of all, I put in the chat earlier, which has now disappeared on my phone, but the idea that and I think one of you, I think it might have been Donna, or Nora, were those kids who were in Matt Burns' study actually dyslexic? Like what was going on there if we can close that gap in 5 years? I've been a special educator for 30 years. I don't buy it. And one of the things I think we've not done is that when we have these successes and when we look at that SIMO study and the like, which again, I have issues with that, regardless, that study was not designed, study was designed to look at the MRI equipment. It was not designed to look at the reading outcomes. They actually, as I recall that study, which is just fascinating. It was just, a little heaven sent outcome that they got those results, but they were really looking, that was very early MRI stuff going on. So very fascinating, but we haven't tied together the special education assessment piece with the outcome piece. I meet in private practice, I meet school special ed teachers all the time who are generally very poorly taught, myself included, poorly taught about how to teach reading, writing, and spelling, particularly given that we are responsible for generally K-12 education. And so to know standards and expectations and curriculum and everything, it's pretty crazy. So I meet special educators all the time who don't know how to write a goal to get at the identified need that the school psychologist has found in the evaluation. So we have goals on the evaluation or goals on the IEPs, and then we ask them, well, what are you trying to look at here? What's the progress? How do you take data? And in the quiet part out loud, they'll say, I don't really understand what we're trying to get at here, right? They don't have the mentoring and support. So there is, we have to take care when using the word dysteachia, but there is that concept that is real, that we need professional development with our special educators, with all of our interventionists, as well as general ed classroom teachers. Secondly, this whole conversation really begs the similarity to the dialogue, and I think it was 2022 that came out in February when the ELL folks, Catherine Escamilla and others put out a webinar on why ELL instruction was very different than the science of reading and didn't align.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, that's really where the Reading League jumped in, started to build bridges with that community. It resulted in the Reading League Summit and really trying to figure out where are there crossovers and similarities? Where does the science of reading and instructional practices and research, the research base around ELL, where does it dovetail? Where doesn't it, what do we all need to learn from each other, right? It really feels like there needs to be a similar process with IDA. And I am not in touch with if and how IDA is interrogating this topic. Again, the organization that used to be called the Orton Annals, or the Orton Killingham Association, right? But it's been 100 years. All groups can evolve and should evolve with research.
Right.
Tim Odegaard and others have been really great folks have been in charge of the research arm there and planning that for the conference. It really feels like if it hasn't happened already, it has to happen. That we, in the comments here, I'm just about to do Wilson training. Should I do it or not? Oh, do EBLI, don't do Wilson. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop the pitting of, and I know that's none of our intent, but teachers, to David Belk's comment, broke teachers are trying to fund and do the best that they can for their for their kids, and often we're self-funding these endeavors, and so we're trying to make the best use of our money.
So
how do we do this, and how do we bring people together to support educators who are trying to make those hard decisions? And it may be that we need to set aside some of those practices, just like we needed to set aside balanced literacy. That's
Eileen,
part of
can
what.
I interrupt a
Yeah,
second?
yeah,
Can you
sure, of course.
can you like give me a summary sentence of like what your question is?
Less a question, more points. One was about just the idea
Oh, I do.
of.
Can I address the first one that seemed like
Yeah.
somewhat of a question with like
Yeah.
were these kids
Okay.
dyslexic or not?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
So what the study that Matt Burns, there was a lot of different schools and different districts, first grade through 12th grade, whole class one-on-one instruction, that he analyzed the data that independently was gathered outside of me. So I don't know the background of these kids, or I do know that they were very low level reader, the sixth graders, the 10th graders, a lot of them are, low level readers, regardless of what their diagnosis may have been or their label may have been, and this is something that is replicated by brand new teachers. I just had a data come in of a special ed teacher taught 46 ELL special ed sixth graders. 46. I'm like, how fair is that? Every one of them, huge.
Yes.
So the thing of it is
Yes.
it's replicated with teachers, it's replicated with parents, it's replicated with non-educators like me, it's replicated with all kinds of people with this type of instruction, regardless of the diagnosis or how low the student is. It would be great if we could have some research, which costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and is typically connected to people who are connected to universities and people who have money, right, to do that. So we would love the answers to all of those questions. But what we know from hundreds of thousands of kids between all that have been taught this and tens of thousands of practitioners is that this kind of gains, which are not seen anywhere with anything else, are normal and typical and replicable immediately. Not replicable once you become really, you've got to be an excellent, perfect teacher of this. Replicable when you're in your first year of learning it. So
I agree.
What we want to say with that, as far as so much of what you're saying, absolutely, let's look at the student outcomes. So much for me, again, my background, I'm a neonatal ICU nurse 30 years ago until I fell into this because of my own daughter's struggles, is focused on the adults and what the adults think or what they believe or what they want or what they've done or what they don't want to do. The adults are the focus. And I beg all the time, could we look at the children? What is happening for student outcomes? And I think that if we could gather together about what about these children who are literally committing or trying to commit suicide, who are literally so traumatized, the teachers are traumatized too, but having this conversation with all of us who care deeply about kids, if we could put aside, you're dissing me and I'm dissing you and I believe this. And it doesn't matter what any of us believe at all.
Right.
What matters
Right.
are the student outcomes. So if
Yeah.
we look at those, and I say all the time with what Marnie showed here, here's my data. Where's yours? I have, so I quit. Nobody cares about it. People used to say back at the beginning, maybe in the early 2000s, where's your data? So we started putting it in our training. He's like, we don't want your data. And I'm like, they just spent all this time and energy getting this data and you don't want the data. Well, and it's just like, that's not possible. You can't do that in that amount of time. So we've kind of ignored the data because you look at the direct instruction research back with Project Follow Through and billions of dollars, and they showed huge gains above everything else, and that was shoved under the rug. The data isn't really what motivates what's going to be taught to kids. And that's unfortunate because who is it caught in the crossfire? Teachers and kids,
And kids,
especially
yeah.
kids.
Right.
So
The box
this is the
doesn't teach
problem.
children. Yep.
So, what do we do is we unite instead of divide more. I think we have enough wars in everywhere, but especially in literacy education, that maybe that's not working.
Well, and I agree. And I use a linguistics phonics based approach in much of my work. And I show up at IEP meetings with kids, very often it's NWEA MAP or it's iReady or something that the school's using. So while I have my own issues with that, great, sure, let's reference that. And they're just shocked and surprised at the progress, years of growth that kids are making. And, the teachers are sending notes to the parents and they're both sending notes to the principal and it's getting up to the
Well, this
upper
is
up.
the key. If you have 95 to 100% of your kids at or above grade level, keep doing what you're doing. If you do not, there's only one question that anybody, me, you, or anybody needs to ask. If we do not have 95 to 100% of our kids, or at least 90% at or above grade level, the question is, what do I need to do different? If every one of us asks that question instead of what are they doing wrong, or this is the problem with that, or it's the kids, or it's their mom, or it's their whatever, maybe it's their teacher, who knows? But we have to ask the right questions. What do we need to do differently to deliver to these kids so that they can become highly proficient at literacy? So it's a big conundrum for sure. Anything else,
Right.
Donna? Thank you
Nope.
for coming back on.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay, I think we're going to end on that note. I think that this has been a very insightful evening with lots of great information. We still have 169 people that stuck around for almost 2 hours to hear this conversation. So yay, team.
Thank you.
And I look forward to continuing this conversation because I know this is so important for everyone to hear and to experience. So thanks, team, for all the hard work you did. And for those of you who showed up, if you want to record the chat, go to your More button at the bottom of your page, click on More, and it says, no, I'm wrong. Go to the chat. Go to the chat and there will be a button and it says save chat and you can download the chat so you can have all that just for your very own. And Nora, they will be getting this. Everyone who registered will be getting this recording in a day or two. And you will be hearing from us because there were a lot of people who wanted to know more. So
Well, and also, Donna, all these questions that we weren't able to get to with future presentations, we can kind of mine those and
for
use
sure.
that to direct what we can share.
Exactly. All right, friends. Thank you for being here and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.